The first thing I'd like to say is that the travel sector is doing very well. People are still travelling, despite things like tough budgets, the dollar dropping, all these sorts of things, consumer confidence being quite low. People are still travelling. And I think that's for a combination of factors. A lot of new airline entrants coming into the marketplace. Certainly the low-cost carrier phenomenon over the last 5 to 10 years in particular has made it very affordable to travel. And you'll know yourself, if you've been to Europe in the last couple of years, it's now cheaper to fly to Europe than it was 20 years ago. And in fact, I'm just about to take my family for our first European holiday. And I haven't been to Europe myself for 20 years. And it's just amazing that I can book an airfare so much cheaper than what I paid 20 years ago.
Australia's cruise industry passed an important milestone just last year. For the first time ever, exceeded 1 million cruise passengers in a calendar year. So when you consider our population, that's pretty huge. River cruising has particularly taken off with a 62% increase from 2013 to 2014. So 80,000 passengers just last year river cruised.
And even though outbound growth is slowing, it's still growing at around 6%. Domestically, we're starting to see signs of recovery in the domestic tourism market. After probably more than a decade of flat growth, or in some regional areas negative growth, we are now starting to see a bit of a turnaround, which is great. The inbound sector just keeps going from strength to strength. I think we're at the moment surpassing something like 9 million inbound visitors into Australia. It's phenomenal. A lot of that growth is driven from China and Asia, but more so from China. The Chinese numbers are staggering, not only in terms of arrival figures, but in terms of what they spend here on the ground. One of the big things for our sector is, with so many channels, from your traditional bricks and mortar retail to wholesale to now online travel agents, aggregators, channel managers, consolidators, and it's so complex. And what we're finding is that people need to prove how they add value. That's the key thing. Where do you add value in the distribution channel? Big changes, of course, is distribution and the channels from the consumer to the product. And there's so much diversification. There are so many new business models. It's getting really confusing for the consumer. Who do you trust? Who do you book through? Where do I go? International competition. There are now more international destinations coming to Australia to market themselves to Australians. Even just the USA market, if you look at that alone. 5 to 10 years ago, the USA market wasn't really targeting Australia. Some of the airlines were doing some marketing, and there were some co-op campaigns and things like that. But all of a sudden, the state tourism boards got in. Visit California, Hawaii. They've all been marketing here for a while. And then the national body got its act together, Brand USA, and started targeting Australia. And we've seen tremendous growth to the States over the last 5 years. So that's just one example, but there are many, many more destinations that are targeting Australians because of our propensity and enjoyment of travel. Of course, in our sector, a little different to the hospitality sector, where people watch TV shows and they become an expert on cooking. In our sector, all you need is an internet connection, and all of a sudden you're a travel agent. So anyone can research, plan, and book a holiday now. And what we find, we hear amazing stories all the time. Consumers will walk into a travel agency and say, there it is. And they've got, a 2-week itinerary planned. They've done all the work themselves. They just want someone else to book it and see if they can get a better deal. So it's amazing how technology, and I know it's the next subject point, has really impacted on our sector. But one of the key reasons I was asked here tonight was to talk about the deregulation of the travel industry. So AFTA, for about 5 years, drove a lobbying campaign to deregulate the sector, which meant ending licensing of travel agents. So in each state and territory, you had to be licensed. And if you're a licensed agent in everywhere except the Northern Territory, you had to also contribute to what was known as a Travel Compensation Fund. Now, the licensing and the TCF officially ended 30 June 14. So for the last year, we've been operating in the new deregulated environment. And in its place, AFTA was afforded some funding to set up what's known as ATAS, which is the AFTA Travel Accreditation Scheme. It is a voluntary scheme, so we have people that compliance area goes through to make sure the business is solvent. And that's really important, because if you're a consumer booking travel, you want to know that your agency is a solvent business and they're not taking your funds and using it to run their own operation or gamble it or whatever they've done in other cases over the years.
We had an example last week of some customers that were due to go out the next day on a cruise, and they didn't have their documents, and the daughter rang and said, we're waiting on the documents, and it turned out that this dodgy agent had taken their money, $15,000, and they had no cruise. So, and again, they were just, no accreditation, obviously not ATAS, no comeback, no TCF, they've lost their money.
It's hard to stop fraud, and fraud will still go on, but, if you're booking through an ATAS accredited agent, you should feel confident that you're booking through a trusted, credible travel professional. So for people that are out there starting a travel business, if they want to become ATAS accredited, they're going to have a qualification going forward. It's something that I believe is important for the future of the industry, to make sure that people are trained and are experts in not only the destination, the product, but they know how to run a business. And they're accredited by ATAS. If you're booking travel through them, you should feel confident that you're going to get the quality product and service that you've been promised, and that your payment is hopefully secure.
And a new concept in cruising, we've really taken the concept of the river cruising and put it into the ocean cruising product, where it's all verandas, it's small numbers, only 1,000 people travelling, and that's something that the passengers and the consumers have kind of asked for. The other key changes, I guess, is the highly competitive market, that consumers are all vying, they understand now the market. They're out there looking online, and yes, we sell Viking cruises here in Sydney, but you can go onto a website and get a Viking cruise through a US-based online agency. So we're constantly trying to explain ourselves of, well, why would you book with us here in Sydney, and what are those inclusions? And, so it's really about, keeping up with the times and making sure that we're really ahead of all of that. The customer's more savvy, as Gary mentioned. The customers really know what they want now, and they'll often come to you with, I've looked at this, I've got this price, what can you do? And, you can't always meet their request, but just the fact that they are far more educated now in everything. In terms of on our ships, we've got iPads now in our cabins, that sort of thing. Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi on all of our cruises, which is something that's, consumer driven. But then again, talking about things that when they don't go right, like we have our guest information online, so the guests can actually go online to try, and the idea is to save us doing the work and let us have more time to be on the phones and selling. But when it goes down, it's definitely an issue, because they're ringing up, they're trying to fax the form, and it's just creates more issues than it's worth, particularly with our older guests. We have some of our younger staff kind of saying, well, Mr. Brown, you've just got to do the online form, and with no kind of empathy and understanding that this is a person who's perhaps just learnt the internet, and we're now trying to get them to do the online form. So it sounds great in theory, but it isn't always the answer.
We've been in online, computer reservation systems, GDS, for over 40 years. So, these systems have been around, they've evolved, there are more of them, and there are more of those channel managers and aggregators that I was talking about, which are businesses that basically just take in all the inventory from all the people that are selling online, and the hotel or whoever they're dealing with are able to know exactly how many rooms they've got left across all those different channels that they're selling, and they can adapt those as they see fit, which can allow them to adjust pricing. The lastminute.coms of the world, when they came into the marketplace, they started to change it up as well. So it's been around in our sector for a long time. Of course, some of the newer things in the last 5 years or so, the things like review sites, TripAdvisor, moving away from the old guest book at, when you check out, how was your stay, to, rate your stay now online. And how do you deal with that when you get a bad review? That's really evolved, and I know that it's caused the accommodation sector a lot of concerns. I presume a lot of you probably just think that TripAdvisor is the biggest review site out there. Bookings.com gets more than double the traffic than TripAdvisor for reviews. It's huge. So, they're a massive player out in the market. In our sector, it's all about tracking the customer, as they're planning, as they're booking, on their trip and post their trip, and being able to communicate with them all the way through that journey. So knowing their preferences, knowing where they want to go, looking after them if something goes wrong. Of course, things like Smart Traveller, which the federal government run, giving warnings about different destinations. These sorts of things are really important because they've got your details. So know where you be on any trip that you're going on. And if something does go wrong, they can try and contact you and evacuate you or get you out of the danger zone or whatever it may be. The very big thing happening in our sector is called NDC, which is called New Distribution Capability. And it's a program being introduced by IATA. IATA is the International Airline Transport Association. So they're the association that represents most of the airlines around the world. And they deal with the payment cycle for when the travel agent pays an airline and how, so on. They're about to introduce the ability for agents and anyone else to be able to sell all the various ancillary services on airlines. So, we're starting to see it now. Okay, you can book your seat, but, do you want to book the meal, the video, the pillow, the blanket, all the other things that you may want, and the ability for people to earn a commission on those sales, which typically you can't do now. So there's a lot of information that still needs to filter through the travel agency community, let alone through to the education sector, about how that will work. But in coming years, that will change a lot the way things are booked.
Outbound is pretty much, we've set up a little team, I suppose, of people that are proactively talking to people and calling outbound, like we do with Seek and other areas of our education, calling out to those consumers that have already ordered a brochure with us, perhaps. In the past, we've just been kind of reactive and just sat there and waited for them to call us on our inbound reservations and hope that we capture a sale. But from what we know, we're the only cruise company of our competitors that are doing something like that. In terms of Viking, we see things like we have obviously a really state-of-the-art reservation system. We're really big on social media, so we're right out there with making sure that we're responding to any posts, Facebook and TripAdvisor, Cruise Critic, all those sort of things. We're making sure that we have to really be on top of that, and we've got one person employed just for that purpose. So it shows you that it also creates jobs, down that side as well, on the other side.
Interestingly now, I've seen some stats lately that online spend has actually surpassed traditional advertising spend. And you see mixed reports, and I've seen mixed reports over the last year. Some people say it's getting close. Other reports have got it going past traditional spend. So, it's really amazing how that's grown. Remarketing is huge, what we do in terms of online. Most of our money goes on digital, online marketing, social media, and remarketing, tracking those people and just following them around. Telling them, why they should book through a travel agent that's accredited, etc., which, what I talked about earlier. One of the biggest things I believe is resourcing. Who are you going to commit in your business to handle all of that interaction through the social media channels? I know in the cruise sector, P&O Cruises, they've got a huge number of people on their team. As part of their job description is to go online every day on their Facebook account and interact with their clients. It's about being always on these days. You can't switch off in running a business. Any interaction you have with any customer at any point in time could make or break you.